Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the lakeFS Summer 2026 release, which was just announced at the very end of July, so just a couple of weeks back. So here's what's in store for us today. We're going to start really quickly just with the context on why data governance matters now more than ever, and we'll then get on to the fun stuff, and we'll talk about what we shipped during the summer release. We'll take a deeper look into each of those features, and then of course we'll finish with a demo of our one of our highlight features for the release, which is datasets. So let's just start by quickly covering what was introduced in the summer release in case you missed the announcement. We've added a bunch of really exciting new features like datasets, multi-tenancy, an auditing solution, object level ABAC, and branch and object lifecycle management. And I'm going to walk through each of these in much more detail throughout the presentation, but that's just a quick snapshot of what just shipped. So that's what's in the release. But really quickly, I first just want to kind of zoom out to the bigger picture to help explain why we focused on this specific set of capabilities. And we focused on governance because of some of the massive new data challenges that have arisen with AI. So the first challenge is unprecedented scale. ML models now train on petabytes of data. Often it's a messy assortment of documents, images, video, and audio, and they're pulled from tons of different places across the organization. And at this scale, governance gets really genuinely challenging, from tracing what went into a model to controlling access to proving how data was used to reproducing results. Things just get really, really messy. The second is new and impending regulations around AI. So rules like the new EU AI Act are pushing companies to keep really clear records of the data behind their AI, exactly where it came from, what went into their models, who has access. There's honestly a whole host of new pressure coming down from regulators. The EU AI Act is likely just the tip of the spear, and there's lots more to come. And the third is autonomy. So more and more, the thing touching your data is not a person, it's an AI agent that's acting on its own. A person might hesitate or think twice before doing something destructive, although, of course, not always. An agent often doesn't. And the real risk is that they move really, really quickly. They move really fast. So one bad or manipulated instruction or misunderstanding of instructions can corrupt a ton of data or leak a huge amount of data before anybody even notices. Um, so Scale, regulation, agents, the three forces I just covered, these are what's kind of bearing down on us all, making governance harder than ever. Now I want to show you how the features that I just introduced when talking about the summer release, how they can help you build governance directly into how you work with data. So each row on this slide pairs a governance concern that you're already fighting and dealing with, but it's now getting even harder because of AI. And it takes those concerns that are getting harder and maps those to how our capabilities can help alleviate the situation. So the first challenge is data provenance and reproducibility. The challenge here is really tracking the exact data that produced a result and being able to recreate it for later on down the road. Datasets solve this by giving you a named version view of specific data at a specific point in time. The second challenge is environment isolation. So you often need to run multiple teams, multiple business units, maybe even customers on shared infrastructure without breaking the core principle of complete isolation, which is really important. Well, multi-tenancy can help you put hard walls inside a single lakeFS deployment, giving each tenant complete isolation while getting you better usage out of your infrastructure. Third, we have auditability and reporting. So when regulators ask, who did what to your data, when did they do it, who accessed it, what types of actions did they perform, pulling logs from across your entire data estate can be a real nightmare. lakeFS's new auditing solution can help alleviate that. It automatically logs every data operation as you work with lakeFS, and then it writes those into a table that you can easily query. The fourth is fine-grained access control. So access, sorry about that, is a government's best practice, and it really requires restricting data down to the most granular level that you possibly can so that users only ever see what they really strictly need to. So object level ABAC or attribute-based access control lets you permission individual objects using their metadata giving you much more specified control over object access rights. And of course, datasets can also play in here by allowing you to permission and govern a subset of data by name without needing to know and track all of the underlying repositories, the prefixes, the labels, or the namespaces. And finally, data retention and deletion. So certain data has to be kept for compliance, while other data needs to be wiped out as soon as it expires or becomes a liability. So branch and object lifecycle management really let you enforce those rules automatically, protecting the data sets you need to retain, while also cleaning up stale branches or expiring old data that needs to be removed for compliance and governance purposes in the background. So that's kind of the core challenges that people are facing that are getting more challenging, mapped to each of the new features and how we can help. And now we're going to go a little bit deeper onto each of these new capabilities. So we'll start with probably the highlight of the release, which is datasets. As we all know, useful collections of business data are almost never contained into one tidy repository and easy to access. So let's give the example of customer 360 view of your data. It might include some profile objects of user profiles, some event streams based on user activity and customer activity, as well as tables of sales data. They could all be sitting in different places. And then when you want to give that data to a pipeline, to an ML training job, or even to a specific team that needs access to the customer 360 data, you have to go ahead and find and manage access to each piece of that data individually. So as part of the summer release, datasets introduce a much better approach to this. So a dataset is a named curated collection of the data that you already have. You choose the pieces that belong together. You give that collection a name and a meaning so you can describe what it is and what it does. And then you can manage that dataset as a single unit. So that means that you can permission the dataset to the users or teams that need it without having to individually manage access to all the underlying data. You can version the data set so that you can always reproduce exactly what data was included at a given point in time. And you can share the data set without copying any of the underlying data. So we'll get in a little bit to how this works, and we're going to show it in the demo. But at a high level, you create a data set. Like I said, you give it a name and a description. You choose the specific objects, the prefixes, the tables, or namespaces. So those are the individual types of data that you can include. You can add metadata, and you can tag the data set to a specific team or a use case, or you can give it governance context to say whether or not it's sensitive or not. And then lakeFS creates a single named, versioned, and permissioned and reproducible collection of your data. So from a governance perspective, the main benefits really are around provenance and reproducibility. They help with provenance because every dataset version is fully mutable and it's pinned to specific commits. So you can always trace exactly what data was included in that version. And that means that if an auditor asks, what data backed this decision or what data went into this ML model, you can point to a specific dataset version and show them exactly what was used down to the underlying commits. And datasets also help with reproducibility because the dataset version points to the same underlying data. You can use it to recreate the exact state later on in the future. So you point a job at a dataset version today, next month, or even next year if you wanted, and it will resolve to the exact same data, even if those source repositories have changed since then. And you can do all of this with datasets without giving consumers access to the repositories behind each dataset. So if someone needs the customer 360 data for their use case, they get that data and nothing else. You don't have to change permissions across the underlying repositories, and you don't have to make another copy of the data just to share it. So really excited about datasets, a really big and important new capability for governance that we introduced with the summer release. Now let's take a look at the next feature, which is multi-tenancy. So lakeFS's new multi-tenant capability, it lets you run completely isolated, basically like mini lakeFS environments inside a single installation. So you could scope each one to a specific business unit, a customer, or even a security domain. And each tenant gets its own repositories, its own users, its own policies, its own audit scope. It's completely isolated. So a good analogy for that is to think of it like an apartment building. The lakeFS installation is the building, and then each tenant is a completely separate apartment inside it. So everyone shares kind of the same structure or install, but no one can access or see into anybody else's unit, which you can think of as like the tenant. Before multi-tenancy, isolation was something you had to really configure a little bit more granularly, with RBAC. But now those boundaries can be built into the system, so teams are isolated by default rather than relying on policies to enforce separation. Of course, this has major governance implications because you can prove boundaries without trusting that every policy was written correctly. If an auditor or a customer asks you, how do you keep one business unit's data separate for another? How do you keep this data set separate from another? The answer could be pretty simple. If they're in separate tenants, they can't access each other's data. Now, let's move on to our new auditing solution. I think we all know that good governance, yes, it's about having access policies in place, very, very important, but you also need to be able to show that they're being followed. So the new auditing solution was kind of built with that in mind. It allows you to capture a complete record of activity across your lakeFS environment. So that means that every single action that anybody using lakeFS performs, it's captured as an audit event. So that includes things like reads, writes, deletes, permission changes, authentication, admin actions, all recorded. And all these events are automatically written into an iceberg table. So you can query them directly with tools that you already know and use, like Spark, Trino, Athena. Um, so it really just takes everything, records it, and makes it really accessible, just kind of built in as you're operating and using lakeFS. So from a governance perspective, this gives you a searchable record of what happened to your data and who did it. This means that you can really easily see who accessed or modified a data set, who changed its permissions and when. You have all of that activity in one place when you need to investigate something or prepare for an audit. And because the evidence is captured automatically, like I mentioned, as teams work, audit readiness doesn't really have to be a separate side project. It's just kind of built into how you're working with lakeFS. Now let's move on to our next feature, object level ABAC or attribute-based access control. Quite a mouthful for the acronym there. So sometimes you don't want to decide access based on a data set or a repository. You want the policy to apply directly to all the data itself. So for example, you might want a user to access any object classified as public, but never anything containing PII or sensitive data or customer data or health data, anything sensitive. So traditionally enforcing that kind of policy meant separating data into different repositories or managing permissions individually object by object. With the summer release, lakeFS extends ABAC from the repository level down to individual objects. So that means you can now define access policies based on object metadata. So things like classification or owner, or whether or not that data is sensitive or not, as I mentioned. And that means that the policy automatically gets applied to new objects as they're added. Pretty important from a governance perspective. It lets you really enforce fine-grained policies without restructuring all of your data. And because those access decisions are captured by our auditing solution, you can also see how those policies are being applied in practice. And now down to our last couple features that we announced as part of the release. We have branch lifecycle management and object lifecycle management. So governance often requires you to do two things at once. You have to retain some data for a required period. It can't be deleted. And then there's other data that has to be deleted. So you're kind of being pulled in two separate directions. Well, with the summer release, you can go ahead and automate both, and you can do it at the branch and the object level. So um, with branch lifecycle management, you can automatically clean up all of your branches based on things like age, based on name, or based even on inactivity. So you can set custom fine-grained policies that will automatically delete your branches after a certain amount of time. And then with object lifecycle management, same principle. It lets you set retention policies for your objects within a repository, and it's done by the prefix level. So based on like almost like logical directories within lakeFS. So different data can follow different retention schedules. So from a governance perspective, you define the policy once, and then lakeFS enforces it automatically, giving you a consistent way to manage your retention and deletion. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of our new features, a little introduction into the five main features that we announced as part of our summer release and how they help you that you can use lakeFS to build governance into your data operations. Enough of the slides. I told you we would do a demo at the end here. So we're going to show you the datasets capability in lakeFS and walk through how you can create a data set in the UI. So if you don't mind, just don't mind me. I'm just going to switch tabs here and look over at my other screen. Okay, so right now what you see is I'm in a repository in lakeFS. I'm in our one of our repositories here. You can see I'm in the main branch, typical repository view. And we have objects and we have tables. So in here we have a number of different prefixes. We have one with data sets. You can see there's a ton of different sub prefixes in here. And then we have a Spotify one, which is the one that we're going to be focusing on for the demo. We have a couple different objects in here. And we also have, so that's our objects. We also have some tables. We also conveniently have a Spotify tracks table. So let's say, I wanted to create a data set just out of these Spotify objects to analyze my music catalog. I didn't want to give them to, I didn't want to give the entire repository to everybody. I just wanted to give the Spotify data. I'm going to walk you through how I can go ahead and create a data set to do that. The data set is really, like I mentioned during the slides, it's going to allow me to grant really curated and specific access to just a slice of my repository, so just the Spotify data. It's permissioned, it's versioned, and it's trackable. It doesn't require copies, so it's a list of pointers, and each one points to an exact commit in the source repository, and you'll see that as we start clicking in. And every dataset version is numbered and immutable, and you'll also see that as well. When I create the dataset, you'll get to see that. So it always resolves to the exact same bytes, and you can diff any two versions to see what changed. So let me go ahead and I'll create that dataset for my Spotify data. Right now, I'm going to start. I'm going to go to the datasets tab, click create dataset. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. So you name it, like I mentioned, Spotify analysis. You give it a description. So I'm going to call this data set to analyze Spotify catalog. You choose your repository. So I was in this product research repository. And then now here's where I mentioned in the webinar, you can permission a data set based on if you're for objects, you can do it by the specific object, or you can do it by the prefix, almost like the logical directory, like I mentioned. And then if you're bringing structured data into the data set, you can do it by table or namespace. But for this one, we were going to look for that Spotify prefix. Well, you can they're all tagged to specific commits. So I'm just going to go to the main. I have this commit, and then here I'm going to go find my Spotify prefix. Here we are. And now you can see that's the target of my data set. So that's being added to the data set I'm creating. Uh, this is a pretty important point too. So as I mentioned, you can also include metadata for each data set, which is really helpful for governance. For this one, it's required to choose whether or not the data is public or sensitive. Let's just go ahead and say this is sensitive data. You can also add and manage keys. So let's say I wanted to create a key for maybe a specific team or a business unit. I could do that, which makes um, you know uh, permissioning and much easier when you're trying to create these data sets and give specific users access. But I'm not going to create it, but just wanted to kind of show you that you could. And then you can open a pull request or you can publish the data set. I'm just going to go ahead and publish directly this time. I'll show you a pull request in a little bit. So I've go ahead and defined my data set. Oh, also really important before I forget, you can also, like you can see it in the UI, you can also see it in a JSON because a lot of the time, I know it's a lot easier just to plug a JSON into your code. So the data set can be defined as JSON. You can take that and you can plug it right into your code. Okay, so I'm going to publish directly. I'm going to describe the change, create my Spotify data set. Let's go ahead and publish it. And now when I go to my data sets, you're going to see here's my Spotify analysis data set. I'll click into that. I'm going to go to our data tab, and you're going to see I just chose that Spotify. I just chose that Spotify prefix. So you're going to see that's those objects that were in that prefix are the only thing that are in my data set. Right now, I don't have any tables. Um, so my data set's created. I can provide fine-tuned access control by creating a policy that allows read access to this data set. I can allow users to only see that specific prefix that was scoped into my data set. But now let's say I wanted to add that Spotify table. I'm going to show you how you can edit the data set. Yeah, I think I showed this right, actually. Yeah, I showed it as a JSON. So we'll edit the data set. Let's go ahead and add. I want to add this table. So I'm going to go to type. I'm going to choose the same commit. I'm going to choose my Spotify tracks table. So now I'm adding that to the data set. And then I'm going to open a pull request. So I could open a pull request. Oh, I got to give the pull request a title. So adding Spotify table, adding table to my Spotify catalog data set. And then it shows you the actual, you can see the changes to that JSON for the diff between the original one and the second one. And I'm going to go ahead and create the pull request. And then I'll show you in my data set, you can see right here, here's my pull request. I can click on it. You can have somebody review it. Let's say, you're working with a teammate and there's a team lead or something. I'm going to go ahead and merge that pull request, and it shows you exactly the lines of code that were added. So now I just did that pull request. Now I want to show you a couple other things in the dataset tab. So now you can see I have my table in there as well. It's in the dataset. There's also a history. So as I mentioned, all the datasets are completely versioned, and you can always resolve and recreate the dataset. So you can see we have V1 and we have V2. It shows what's different between them. And then I could even, oh wait, hold on one second. So I can even go to data. Sorry. Let me go back to my data set. Here we go. So I can even show you V1 versus V2. I don't know why that wasn't loading. At V1, I have no tables. I just have that object. But then if you remember, before I did that pull request, once I did that pull request, excuse me, I added the table. So V1, I just have that prefix, no tables. And then if I want to go, I can go to V2. It'll show you the change to my data set. Now I have the specific objects that I permissioned as well as the table in the data set. So that's really that's data sets. In a couple of minutes, I created a curated permission view over repository data. It's fully versioned and reviewable. There's no copies. Nothing in the source repository is touched. Really easy way to curate and govern data for lakeFS as part of the summer release. That is pretty much all we have for the webinar today. We're really excited about the summer release and all the powerful new features that enhance governance. And we hope you are excited too. If you want to learn more, please go to lakefs.io and click on the book a demo button at the top of the page. And we would be really happy to give you an individualized demo and walk through some of these features in more detail, talk about how they could help you and learn a little bit more about your business and your use case. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining. Hope you found the webinar valuable. Thank you.